Hey guys, if you don't know who I am, my name is Jessica Leichtweisz, and I'm the CEO of Hope Education Services. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. So I've been working as an ABA therapist for the past 12 years, and 4.5 years ago, I opened my company. It's at that point I realized that there's not a lot of collaboration between autism professionals. And on top of that, there's all of the children that had, autism. There was this huge rise of autism in the early 2000s. Well, now they're all adults and they have amazing stories to share. And professionals, there's no platform for a conversation between autistic adults and professionals. And so what I wanted to do is create this video series. We're calling it Bridge the Gap. And this is the very first one, but this is going to be a weekly show. It's going to air Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to be putting out a video every week, and we're going to bridge the gap between autism professionals and the autism community, who has such an incredible and valuable message to share. Today, we're going to have the amazing Ryan Shindler on the show, and we connected on LinkedIn, and he's an autism advocate. He's also an adult who has autism, and I wanted him to share a little bit about what has worked for him in terms of what therapies he remembers having good experiences with, what therapies he didn't have great experiences with. And I'm also going to give Ryan the chance to ask me questions and help me become a better therapist, a better autism professional, and just really to hopefully shed some light for the autism therapist and professional community on really how we can be better and we can serve people with autism in a better capacity. So Ryan, thank you so much for being the first one to come on the show today.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It really is an honor to be here for your inaugural show. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, thank you. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Just happy to be here.
Awesome. So I'm gonna, and one of the things I really don't like when I watch shows is when people are like, "Well, tell me about yourself." But the reality of it is we do need to know a little bit about you. So can you tell us a little bit about, your story of getting diagnosed with autism, what it was like for you as a child, what you're doing now, and like what therapies you had? Can you give us a little bit about your history and your experience?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. I don't remember personally when I was diagnosed, but I know that it was right around the time where I was about maybe 24 months old, around 2. I was diagnosed with what's called PDD-NOS, which is sort of the other. Like if you look at the spectrum of autism, it's a little bit past Asperger's, a lot of people would claim it to be. And the struggle that I found most of it was with executive functioning, with organizing thoughts, emotional regulation, but also with social skills. So I ran the gamut from using occupational therapy, speech therapy, social therapy. I was shuffled around a lot of different places as a kid. And I had an IEP supervisor when I was a little kid. I didn't even question it. I just thought it was something that everyone had. But outside of that, I didn't need a lot of help academically throughout school. I did really well elementary school, all throughout high school, and that's when I got out of the IEP. And I was able to graduate high school, then go to college and get a degree in political science. And then I went to grad school and got a master's in public administration. And that's how I'm able to sit with you today.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that you're sharing right away, because one of the questions parents ask me, and I work right now primarily with children in early intervention, and parents ask me every day, is my child going to be able to go to college one day? Will they be able to work? And the truth is that 12 years ago, when I first started into this field, I don't think a lot of people knew the answer to that question, because there really wasn't a united adult community with autism that people knew about. And social media has changed a lot because it's connected and unified people. But autism rate was 1 in 10,000 just 50 years ago. So there weren't people, and no one really knew the answer to that. And I think the fact that now there are so many adults with autism that are contributing so many positive things, and they're going to school, they're getting degrees. I had another person on my channel I interviewed, and not part of this show. I'll have to bring him back on. His name is Armando Bernal, and he's now a BCBA. And he had ABA therapy as a child, and he has autism. So it's amazing for parents to know, well, yes, like children with autism will grow up into adults with autism. And it's not everybody's story, but for a lot of people, going to college is what's going to happen. You're going to go to college and get degrees and like you said, be academically not only just the same as everybody else, but better than, a lot of people, like, obviously. So, in terms of really the social struggles that you had, Or is that something that you still struggle with today? Or is that something that you are, like, you don't struggle with it anymore? Like, I obviously I had conversations with you and I wouldn't have known if you didn't tell me you had autism.
Well, thank you for telling me that. The truth is, I still do. I'm a little bit comforted by the fact that not everyone's perfect. Even people that are neurologically typical, everything from like cutting someone off the road and shouting at them to saying something rude at the office. It's not like all autistic people lack the social skills, and everyone who's quote unquote neurologically atypical has everything they need. The truth is that I have some social skills that a lot of neurologically typical people don't have, and vice versa. But I think what lingers the most is sort of the belief that I don't have them. And I'm still grappling with, I would say, the trauma and sort of the baggage that came with that growing up.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's right, and that's a lot of parents that I work with. Like, they wonder if they should tell their child, like, you have autism, because
Mm-hmm.
with that, right, comes this like social stigma, and with it comes this belief about who that is, who you are as a person, and people will tell you, "Oh, you're not good at this, you're not good at that," right, and so you sort of carry that on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of like the trauma, were you bullied? Was it teachers? Was it therapists? Was it the therapies? What do you think caused that trauma? Was it just feeling like you didn't fit in?
It
I
was
know that's
less
a tough question.
directly from kids. I mean, there was some bullying, but that wasn't the main part. I think it was mostly just the simple fact that people didn't know how to talk to me. I mean, the therapist, parents, family, my life, like they're all neurologically typical. They love me, they care about me, they gave me all the services they need. They just didn't know how to talk to me. It'd be like if did you have brothers or sisters growing up?
Yeah, I do. I have one brother.
Yeah. Well, imagine if your brother didn't have a dad and had like 8 sisters and he was the only boy growing up in the family. It would seem like he'd be the odd one out or even have a disability by maybe not having the same emotional skills or maybe not liking dolls and stuff like that. He is a very different person, but it would seem like he would be the weird one, even though he's just simply designed a little bit differently. It's a bit like that. I didn't have a lot of people on the spectrum to grow up with or to see as a model from. So it always seemed like I had to always translate myself or adapt what I was doing to everyone else rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, and especially, you said specifically, people didn't know how to talk to me, and
Yeah.
it's interesting because I never heard it phrased that way, and I think that even as a professional with autism, before this conversation, I would have said, well, people with autism, they don't know how to interact with others, but what if that's not true? What if it's that we don't know how to speak to people? We don't know
Yeah.
how to speak to people that are not neurally typical, that are that do have autism. So what you said is so much value. You said
Hmm.
therapists didn't know how to talk to me. So you're speaking to a therapist who's actually sharing this with other therapists. Tell us,
Yeah.
how could we have phrased things better? How do you, as a person with autism, how do you want therapists to talk to you? How can we talk to kids in a way
Sure.
that's going to relate with them better?
That is an excellent question. I've read a few of your articles and it comes from a good place and obviously from a lot of research in ABA and the expectations for how a child should verbalize how he or she is feeling. But it comes from an assumption that these kids on the spectrum don't know how to communicate and they need to learn how to verbalize what they're saying in order to be understood. But we all know that even for people with autism, for organisms that aren't humans, and even for most people, most communication doesn't come verbally. If there's a child, like in your last article, who is sick, that has a tummy ache, that's tired, or even when you have a baby, there are other ways that they communicate that doesn't say, "Mommy, Daddy, I have a stomach ache." They'll cry, they'll wiggle around. Maybe their eye contact is incredibly varied. I think while we should teach kids to talk if they can, we also should be very mindful of how they're communicating right then and meet them halfway.
Yeah, and I think that it's important that, like you said, what we do recognize communication.
Mhm.
And when it comes to autism, there's a huge spectrum, right? And we know that. So I
Yeah.
work with some kids that it is easy to see what they want. Like they might take my hand to something and or they might point to what they're looking for, or they might turn and look at what they're looking for. And then I do work with kids that communication is much more difficult. And that even as a therapist who's trained, it's very hard for me to figure out what they want or to figure out, why they're engaging in certain behaviors. And I think that's the hard part, is that when it comes to like ABA and it comes to terminology and it comes to articles, some things will apply to some kids and some things won't apply to some kids.
Yeah.
And how you treat someone like yourself who is, and just like in, every other community, there's children with autism that are severely cognitively impaired, and there's children with autism that are geniuses and have a genius level IQ. And that's in every population. It's not just in autism. But you obviously can't teach or interact the same way with both people on both opposite ends of the spectrum. So in terms of, just the communication aspects of it, I watched this video on YouTube and it was amazing. It said, here's like 5 things not to say to someone with autism. So let's just assume now we're working with someone that can talk and we're working with, a person with autism. What are things that we can say to you, or say things we should not be saying to people with autism to make people feel more comfortable?
I'm actually going to question that very question itself. As you mentioned, we're making an assumption that we're referencing someone on the spectrum who can talk. There are a lot of people who can talk, but that doesn't mean that they're inherently going to understand what you're saying. Like you could talk to me what types of phrases are offensive to people on the spectrum. I'll be able to verbalize it because I've had a high school education. I understand what language entails and the connotation behind that. You could also talk to someone my age who can talk technically, but from a psychologist perspective might have sort of the mental capabilities of an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old. So even though they have the same quote unquote capabilities, they're not going to understand that question. I sent a survey out to some of my colleagues on the spectrum because I'm doing a special project. And a lot of them, even though they can read English, don't understand the questions that I'm asking. And you've seen this with neurologically typical people as well. So that's why I feel uncomfortable fully answering that question. That said, I do have a couple of pointers that I can point out.
Okay.
We're not all Hallmark special inspiration cases. A lot of us can get tired by saying, oh my God, you're such an inspiration. You're working so hard. The fact that you've gone through so much means a lot. And it does mean a lot, but we're just living our lives. This is just normal to us. It'd be like if an alien said, oh my God, you're so special for not having 4 legs or for not being able to move stuff with your mind. It's just something that we're not able to do. It just comes with the programming. We may be a little bit different than you guys, but we're still human beings. We walk among you, we talk among you, we have a lot of the same belief systems and ideas. We're not basket cases, so to speak.
Yeah, and it does make sense. Like you don't know anything different. And I like that. You said, I'm just living my life.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And this is my first time doing this show. And you can hear it. And anyone who's watching this, I'm not even sure what to say or what to ask. Because I don't think there's been a lot of this. Like what we're doing here, this is the inaugural show. Yeah. I don't think that there's been a lot of times where adults with autism sat down with professionals that are working with kids with autism. And I work with kids. I don't work with adults with autism. So I haven't had these conversations before. And, for me, this is such a privilege because I work with kids that are at the point where they can't really talk yet. I mean, and mostly, like I said, I work mostly with early intervention. So mostly the kids that I'm working with or the preschool or early intervention, they're typical kids are not talking that much about it either. So I've never really had like this conversation before. And we did this on purpose. We didn't actually talk about what we were going to talk about. We said, okay, let's just make this really raw and really real and see what happens and see what comes up and see where it goes and invite other people to kind of into this like fireside chat to see, or coffee chat. I'm doing coffee, but to find out like, what is it, what comes up when autism professionals and people with autism sit together. So if I meet someone, with autism that's an adult, should I not say like, wow, you inspire me so much? And because, I do see the little kid that works so hard. I mean, the kids I work with, they are the hardest workers I know. They put more hours in than I do. I mean, they're just amazing. I mean,
Hmm.
they're doing things that other kids their age aren't being asked to do, and they just do it every day. And it's hard. Sometimes it breaks my heart to see that they can't be kids, because in order to have the skills that a lot of people are just born with, they have to work so hard to get those skills.
What do you mean by they can't be kids?
Well,
I know what you mean, but I want you to verbalize that.
it's like most kids go to school for a few hours a day, and like, let's look at preschool kids. They go to school for a few hours a day, and then it's a beautiful summer afternoon, and they get to go home and play in the backyard with their siblings, or they get to go to the park and play with other kids. And the kids I work with, whether they're in preschool, I do work with kids that are school age, they'll go to school all day, and then they'll come home and they'll like look out the window and see their friends or the other kids playing basketball in the street, and they're doing therapy. They have speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavior therapy, social skills therapy, like you said. And and you said, I'm being shuffled back and forth, but they don't get to experience like just the downtime that a lot of other kids get to experience. So I feel like, and for me, looking back in my childhood, my best memories are the ones where I was playing with my friends outside in the backyard, right? And just exploring and riding my bike, and um, all those things that I got to do. And I'm like, wow, these kids don't get to do that. They wake up, they have therapy, then they go to school, and they come home and they have therapy. And then there's like the bedtime routine and the social stories. And when did they just get to be without doing all that, right?
A lot more kids are like that than you think. Think about, what about a neurologic typical kid? Like, maybe they don't have to go to therapy, but maybe their parents own a restaurant and they have to do a shift with them. Or maybe they come home and they have a ton of homework to do, which is a big problem in our society. Or maybe they come home and the parents are poor, or they're in an abusive relationship where they don't let them go outside. Not just because they're neurologic typical doesn't mean they get to run around and play all day after school. It's not like people with autism or disabilities are the only ones, quote unquote, missing out on their childhood or having an incomplete childhood just because of their disability. And heck, there are lots of people with autism that are still able to play outside and be happy. Maybe that is a part of their therapy. So that's a narrative I hear a lot, that there's the sense that neurologically typical kids get to have this normal childhood and people with disabilities don't. Like, they have a chunk of their personhood or their childhood completely missing that everyone else seems to have. And I've learned that that's not really true.
Yeah, and that is true, obviously, right? There's a lot of kids who unfortunately don't get to experience some of the things that maybe I got to experience, or that.
I would say even in this country, I would say most kids. I think this idea of what childhood should look like, I don't think it's attainable for a lot of kids, even here. I really don't.
Yeah, and today there is a lot of micromanagement, right? And like
Exactly.
when parents are like organizing play dates, and a lot of times it's with like business contacts, and it's you're shuffling kids back and forth between different classes, and parents are preparing kids for college when they're in preschool or even in the womb. Like I've seen parents who they want to figure out what preschool they want their child to go into, and they're not even pregnant yet, and they're like going to these preschools and they're trying to assess it. It's, when is enough, right? And that's like a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you with the homework. I am not a big believer in homework. I mean, if children are going
Neither am I.
for a long, time every day, especially when it is homework that is not necessary or fulfilling. Like, I get to a degree of doing some sort of work at home, but if it's just regurgitating, or if a teacher's just like printing up a worksheet for the purpose of actually just giving an assignment, it's not, I think it's not a good idea. As a teacher, I wouldn't do that. I did work at a school for a brief period, and I wasn't giving homework that, unless it was something that really needed to be done in like a different setting, or a way a parent could help the child to learn. I understand that purpose of it. But just keeping kids busy, I don't see the value in
That would be an option for you to choose, though, if you're a teacher now. With the way school systems are run and the expectations that principals have, and all the testing that has to be done, and the state mandates and the federal mandates, and preparing kids for all these exams, that I'm sure a lot of teachers around this country would love to be able to snap their fingers and assign less homework. But that's not an autonomy that a lot of teachers have anymore.
Yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
wishful thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. So, when I first created this show, what I asked you for is, really, how can I be a better professional by really listening to what you have to say and what you have to share? So there are therapists watching
Hmm.
this show. How can we be better autism professionals, and how can we serve? Is everyone has a good heart, and everyone has
Hmm.
really, like, if you enter the field of autism as a professional, you're probably a really good person. You probably really genuinely want to make people's lives better. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, we do have adults now who talk about their therapist and talk about their experience with therapy. Not everybody, but there are some people who didn't have positive experiences. And they probably had, traumatic experiences with people that really thought they were doing the right thing. So
Hmm.
how can we be better professionals? And how can we make sure that everyone today who's receiving therapy, in 15 years from now, looks back and says, I had a really great experience as a child. I had an amazing therapist and they helped me so much and this is what happened.
Hmm. All right. I have a very clear answer to this. And we talked about this a little while ago. And it's a challenging question. A few days ago, I sent a question asking, in what ways do you as an individual feel oppressed or marginalized in some way by society? For example, if I were to answer that, I would talk about the ways that I'm marginalized as someone with a disability living in a neurologically typical world. But I think in a more pointed example, I would talk about how I'm Jewish, living in a frankly very Christianized world. The fact that all the holidays are centered around Christianity, but people don't even know how to pronounce mine. The fact that if I go to a chorus concert or if I perform, all the songs are going to be in Latin or in English or talk about Jesus, but maybe one or two will talk about mine. The fact that there are people within my society that are being abused and beaten just because they're Jewish, but isn't making the news. I would talk about like the very subtle, but also very formal ways in which my people, just because the fact that we're Jewish, are put at the bottom of the totem pole in our society and often in very invisible ways. And so where I would like you to start in a way that doesn't even have to do with autism. Are there certain ways, whether as maybe a woman or as a self-identified religious Christian or in other ways that you feel you are invisibly ignored or not taken as seriously, or there are certain blockades in life that other people just don't understand, but that you have to fight through every day for reasons completely beyond your control?
It's funny because I really did think about this and I gave
Hmm.
it a lot of thought. And I'm a woman and I'm a woman business
Yes.
owner. And it's not as common for women to be business owners and it's not as common for women. But today I think the world has changed. And I think that today it is socially acceptable for a woman to live alone and a woman to have a business. And I'm in the field I work with, right? Obviously, I'm an autism
Hmm.
professional. It is predominantly women. So I never really
Yes.
encountered that. And I have amazing women that are mentors in my life, and they've just taught me so much. One of my business coaches is Susan Sly. She's an incredible person. She is a mom, actually, of a person that has autism, and I never encountered that. I just, yes, I have and I've had some experiences
Hmm.
with people telling me I could or couldn't do something, but it wasn't something that ever really got in my way. I never took it on. And it was so unusual for me to hear that. I just kind of brushed it off if someone said anything about it. As a Christian, obviously, yes, there's not a lot of people that are um, today, really practicing Christians.
Oh,
But
definitely
in the
not.
same sense, if I want to, I can go to church and connect with other people who, and it doesn't offend me when other people do things.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily it doesn't even really come up when my best friend is not Christian.
Hmm.
I don't think that I really have had, I mean, obviously other people have had trauma, but I don't think I do feel marginalized in any way. I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of people don't know I have a genetic neurological disorder, and you talk about not really knowing anything different. I do. I get tumors on my nerves, and it can cause
Oh,
pain.
wow.
Um, but I run marathons. I actually run ultra marathons. So I do yoga. I have had challenges like everybody else. But to be honest, I wouldn't say any of those challenges define me, or I wake up any day and say wow, this challenge is really marginalizing me. I kind of think I've learned to, like, I don't know how to really just not feel that way, to know that I'm valuable as a person because I matter and I can make a difference, and that my vision of what I want to create and do in life for me is more important than anything else. So I have nothing. I've never really, yes, I've had experiences, but none of them have really affected me.
A lot of the people that you work with don't get to have that choice. That's something that everyone listening needs to understand, whether you're a woman or a man, black, white, doesn't matter. And it doesn't even affect me as much, but for a lot of people, their identities, whether having a disability or the other things they have to deal with life, they don't get to decide whether that affects their self-esteem or whether they get to identify with that. Society picks for them, and they're treated like that accordingly. And I think that's one of the reasons why, especially those people of color, they maybe have higher stress rates and higher mental health and physical health problems, because that stress of being judged, of being watched, of having people not give you the benefit of the doubt, but give you the exact opposite, it weighs on them and for other people in a very constant way. And that's not something that they get to decide. And so that bias is something that weighs on them all the time, and it affects everything. And that includes people with autism and people with very clear physical disabilities. I even felt that way myself. I was at a disability conference and I saw some people there that were on the spectrum or were in wheelchairs and had trouble eating. And, some of them were foaming at the mouth or just didn't have the eating habits that we would associate as being polite. And I felt so much judgment towards them. I can't imagine how much judgment other people would have towards them and how they might be rejected from social circles, even though they're doing their best and doing what's natural to them. I think to be an effective, not just be an effective person, but also just be an effective ally to someone with autism, effective therapist, is to realize that they live very differently than you, that they go through challenges that you will never understand. And that, worst of all, they live in a society that sees their very existence as a problem, as something to be overcome, as something to be cured, rather than something to work with and something to adapt their behavior around with, rather than the other way.
Yeah, and I think that's right, part of the whole autism acceptance community, and then this recovery movement of wanting to recover children with autism, and the balance in between. And I think that we talked about this a little bit briefly the other day. You said, well, yes, you're going to treat behavior, you're going to treat problems, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to cure a person. And it's a hard balance, and it's even just, I don't think anybody knows how to talk about it. And and I work with,
we need to.
Yeah, and I work with people with opposite extremes. Right, I work with kids and parents. They have to watch their kids. They don't have any language skills, and maybe their children are very aggressive and they're self-injurious. They're hurting themselves, and just and the parents are distraught, and they would do anything to try to help their kids. And then, I work with kids that are just really smart, and they're I have a boy I work with, and he's so smart, and then he can do basically anything that anyone else can do. But yeah, he's a little socially inappropriate. He eats weird.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll work on eating with him, and I'll say, okay, we're going to follow the social rules of eating. And am I doing the wrong thing? Should I not be telling him don't slurp your food, or don't pick out the ramen noodles out with your hand? Should I let him do that? And just, and not try to make him adapt his behavior. And it's such a hard balance, and no one is talking about it. I think we're I really truly believe that this is the first video ever airing on the internet where someone's actually discussing, how do we talk about this, and how do we reconcile the difference between not trying to change a person and not try to change who they are, but making sure that we help people who really need help, and we teach in a way people can learn, and we do teach people skills that they may not develop without being taught them directly.
Yeah.
And there's that balance. So how do we achieve that balance? And I don't know that I don't know, I know, but maybe enough of these conversations will happen that we can figure it out together as a community.
I think that's the right move, because I'm wrestling with that question right now. And I don't know. I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have a lot of the opportunities that I had if I wasn't taught and drilled down a lot of those social skills. But it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost of being very self-conscious, being hyper aware, or at least hyper analyzing how people might perceive me, even though I've slowly realized that I'm not given as much scrutiny as I once thought. And so it's sort of unlearning that judgment. It's a very hard balance to strike.
Yeah, it is. And and it's like kids that are 10, and maybe they're hand flapping, and I'll tell them,
Yeah.
listen, like, don't do that because people will think it looks weird. And they're like, but it makes me feel better, and I don't really care what
Hmm.
people think. And I'm like, what a great answer. Like that, I mean, and that happened. A kid said that to me, and he's like, oh, I don't care what people think. It makes me feel good, and people don't like it. They don't have to look at it. And I mean, like, that's so true, right?
Hmm.
But then when I have the kid that's like 5 years old and they can't talk at all and they're banging their head on the floor and they have to wear a helmet to literally keep
Hmm.
them alive, and the parent is hysterically crying, I can't tell that mother, accept autism. There's nothing to be cured.
Hmm.
It's not a medical disability. It's just a neurological
Hmm.
difference in learning and a different interactions. But it's so different. And I think that's like, it's so different. These two people are so different. And I think that's why there's so much confusion on not only how to teach autism, but how to talk about autism.
Hmm.
People don't know what to say. And that's the reality. And I think that I'm so excited you came on here today, Ryan. And I think
Me too.
that bridging this gap and having these conversations and enough of them, I'm learning in this process, and I'm recording these videos because I want other people to learn from them. And like I said, if you watch this video from start to finish, you saw I didn't know what to ask you. This was the first time I've done this. I didn't know what to say.
Hmm.
I make videos all the time, and I'm usually really good in front of the camera, and I can present information really clearly, and I'm rambling and I'm just stuttering, and I don't even know what to ask you. And I think that that's what I'm so excited is going to come
Hmm.
from these videos, because I'm not the only one who doesn't really,
Hmm.
as a professional, know what to say to adults with autism today. It's like we live in this box, therapists, where, I work with kids that are usually under 3, and then they turn 3 and I get new kids. So it's like, but children with autism, they grow up into adults.
Yeah,
And
if they're lucky.
if they're lucky, yeah, right. All of us, or no one's from promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, now, today, there is an autism community, and it's time professionals listen to what they had to say. So
Hmm.
that's the purpose of this show, bridge the gap. Ryan, I know you're an advocate for, for people with disabilities or people with autism. If someone wanted to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, there are several ways that you can do so. The easiest way is always to email me at Shindler5610, which is SHINDLER5610 at gmail.com. You could always find me on LinkedIn at Ryan Shindler, no C. And as always, I think those are the best ways to find me so far. Reach me out on LinkedIn or email, and I'd be happy to talk.
Awesome. And I will put those links below in the bottom as well. Now, if you are an adult with autism, if you want to come on the show, I'm hoping that this video not only circulates between autism professionals, but also with adults with autism. And there are a lot of adults with autism who reject autism professionals, thinking that
Hmm.
all we want to do is change who they are. And I don't want that to be the case. So if you're an adult with autism and you want to come on the show and you want to share a little bit about your life and what has worked for you, and share your knowledge with us, the community, you can reach out to me. My email is jessica@leichtweisz.com. If you go onto my website, if you're an autism professional, you're an autism parent, and you're learning from this as well, you connect with me on my website. It's hopeeducationservices.com. This show will be put out every Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. I will be emailing it out to my email list. So if you wanted to make sure you don't miss it, just jump on my email list on my website, and I will send it out to you. So I really do hope that this was valuable, Ryan. This was so valuable for me. I'm so excited we did this.
Me too.
And I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation. Maybe once I kind of figure out how to phrase things and what to say, we can have you come back on, and we can record another episode together. This is really raw. This is really real, guys. This is just, this is my attempt to bridge the gap between autism professionals and people with autism. So thank you, Ryan, for going first and being the first
Thank
one.
you, Jessica.